D.C. Councilmember Mary Cheh joins us right now. Thank you for joining us, Councilmember Cheh.
My pleasure.
Now, the big news over this weekend is that you headed up the committee that pushed through the new driver's license provisions for illegal immigrants, undocumented workers, whatever you want to call them, here in the District of Columbia. But one thing that is really drawing attention is the original proposal from Mayor Gray was to stay in line with federal law, which would require the identification or driver's license for an illegal immigrant would have a special marking on it to differentiate it from a U.S. citizen's driver's license. You and your committee removed that provision. Why?
Well, there are a couple of reasons. First of all, if you go back to the original requirement, the real ID requirement, although that was put in law, about 8 years ago, it's never been actually implemented because there are so many complications for it. So there's real reason to question whether it will ever actually be implemented. And second, if it were to be implemented, there are different ways to implement it. The idea that you would put on a license plate not valid for federal purposes is like a scarlet letter saying that driver's license belongs to someone who is here in an undocumented status. So,
which is the truth. That person is here in an undocumented status.
That is the truth. But the whole point of getting people to get a driver's license is that they're driving anyway. What we want is people, if they're going to be driving anyway, we want them to be licensed. We want them to go through the training program.
Oh.
We want them not to flee accidents as they typically might do because they don't have a driver's license. And generally, all of the evidence shows that it's a far safer situation to have people, if they're driving, to have been licensed.
Okay, well, that's fine. I think the question here then is with regard to the marking on the license, and it's not just me raising this question. The Washington Post editorial board actually came out against this in their July 7th op-ed. But let me just ask you this, just hypothetically. We could have God forbid, somebody enter this country illegally with very nefarious purposes. They could be here to carry out a terrorist attack. They got a D.C. driver's license that makes it look like they're a citizen because of the provision you put in here. They could get on a plane and then do something horrible with it. Would you feel culpable in any way because you allowed them on the plane?
Well, your hypothetical is really, not the one that I think is realistic because the fact of the matter is it's not as if we're saying anybody just come to the office here and we're going to be dishing out licenses. They have to have a variety of other forms of identification to establish who they are and, establish that they've lived here a certain period of time. They even have to seek a federal ID tax number. So it's hardly likely that this is going to be the scenario that, would exist. And we already have a situation, for example, in Washington State where they have licenses given to undocumented individuals and to citizens, and there's no marking on those.
Well, what's the problem with having just a mark that says that this is not a United States citizen?
The problem is that the individuals, because that would be, this red flag, you're not going to get the compliance with the licensing requirement. You're going to have essentially the same kind of situation that you have now, which is people who are living in fear, and maybe they should appropriately live in fear, which is the sense of what you're telling me.
I'm just simply saying that there ought to be something that says that this person is not a citizen of the United States for others, so that when you do use that driver's license for other reasons, I mean, driver's licenses are used for ID in many, many, many situations, you're at least on the record as saying, I'm not a U.S. citizen.
Well, but that's the whole point. We think that driver's licenses are used to warrant you to drive, and it requires that you go through certain tests to be able to drive, that you have to have insurance, things of that nature. And so the point of, in the larger, use of the license as an identification tool, well, then, that's that. But we're worried about people who are driving unsafely in the District of Columbia, and we want them to be licensed, and we want them to have insurance.
I think we're just, I think we've heard your point, and appreciate you making it. I think that a lot of people look at it differently. But let's move on, because there's this living wage bill that is now being considered by the council. Walmart would have to pay, basically, the way this bill is laying out, more per hour than other employers around the district. And a lot of people say, well, is that really fair? Do you think it's fair?
Well, I'm going to leave aside fairness. I voted against the bill and intend to vote against it again when it comes up on Wednesday because I think it's counterproductive. The objective, is to get certain companies, I guess, to pay the large retailers to pay this living wage and provide benefits, and I'm absolutely sympathetic to that. But I think that the way we're going about it really is, as I said, counterproductive. Nothing limits it to district residents, and the overwhelming number of people who work here don't even live here. But it is quite narrow. Why are employees of large retailers more deserving of a living wage than others? And it even exempts people who are working for large companies that
So you'd be in favor of raising the minimum wage across the board?
Yeah, I certainly would want to look at that. But there's another way to go, too, and that's to expand the earned income tax credit, which, studies have shown is a much better instrument if you're going to try to bring up, poor workers to a better standard of living. In addition, when you raise the minimum wage or you go to these living wages, what happens apparently in some of these cases is what you're doing is it attracts more affluent workers. They're not affluent, but more affluent workers, middle-income spouses or retirees, and they push out the poorer workers. So, it turns out that you may not be helping the very group that you're attempting to help. Not only that, I have a problem with the fact that, if you take the Walmarts of the world, where we need those stores are in Wards 7 and 8 that border Maryland. And if they're not willing to come here, what they can do is simply locate right on the border, fall into the loving arms of Maryland, and, we won't have those businesses actually in the District of Columbia.
All right. D.C. Councilmember Mary Cheh, thanks for joining us. Really quickly, you're pushing through this ban for outdoor smoking in all of D.C. I've only got 30 seconds, but do you really believe that secondhand smoke, like out in a park or out on the mall, is just as dangerous as secondhand smoke in a bar or in a small restaurant?
Well, we've had physicians and others, health providers, come and tell us that there's no level of secondhand smoke that's really safe. And
so just using common sense, you think that in a park it's going to be just as bad as in a restaurant?
Well, no, I think you're phrasing it wrong. I think it would be bad. It may not be just as bad, but it would be bad. In addition, it applies to bus stops where people are standing and they have to wait right in that area. But there's something else about recreation centers. It's a question of modeling behavior. Who's going to be at the recreation center, at the parks? It's going to be kids, and therefore smoking in and around recreation centers carries that a problem as well.
Oh, so it's teaching kids a lesson, not necessarily about health. All right,
No, it is about health. Why do you change things? I'm telling you, it's about health, but it's also about that.
I don't change things. You just brought that up as in terms of modeling for young people. Frankly, that makes a lot more sense than saying that it's just...
You say it's not necessarily about health. I'm saying it is necessarily about health, and it is also about that.
I know. I'm actually trying to help you out because I think that makes a lot more sense than it does to say that being in a park... You're going to secondhand smoke in a park, in an outdoor, obviously ventilated area. You're outside in a park. How can it just be dangerous for somebody as it is in a restaurant?
Well, you want to put it that way. You say just as dangerous. I'm saying that it's dangerous and it has harmful health effects, even if it is not at the same level. Because of the concentration, it doesn't mean that it's not dangerous.
But hold on. If there was a health study that showed that there wasn't any danger to secondhand smoke outdoors, you would still push for this bill because you don't want to show young people that they're smoking.
Well, that would also be a consideration. But I'm telling you, you don't have such studies. What you're arguing for doesn't exist. I have testimony from people at a hearing to tell me that secondhand smoke, particularly if, let's say you're standing, I've seen this myself, you're watching your kid's soccer game and somebody's smoking next to you.
Would you be in favor of just getting rid of all smoking in the district, period?
That bill is not before us, and I'm not.
Well, if you can't smoke outdoors, where can you smoke?
You can smoke in your own home.
Okay. All right, Mary.
By the way, let's not say you can't smoke outdoors. It's within 25 feet of playgrounds, parks, dog parks, things of that nature, and bus stops.
Right.
15 feet from a posted bus stop sign.
Well, we've gone way over.
We have. It is always good to have you, and it's always very engaging.
We do appreciate you coming on. We do. We really do.
Okay, sure. It was a lot of fun.
Thank you, Mary Cheh.
Okay.